Okay, so this is the most current version of Blender, and a lot of you recognize the scene. So Eric and everybody, you guys want to use a 3-button mouse because you can scroll in, scroll out. If you click the mouse wheel again and drag, it tumbles around. You can select these 3 objects. Now to delete objects in Blender, and you can see they're all within this collection. We have a camera cube. You got to push X. So yeah, some of this is going to be familiar to you, and for Eric, you just gotta you're gonna probably watch this video a few times. So I'm gonna just quickly show you how, if you wanted to make like a simple toy, like a toy muskox, how I would go about doing it with just these simple shapes. So to delete this shape, I'm gonna hit X, and this little delete comes up, and then I just choose that. Now to add an object, I always use the shortcut. I think there's this button add up here and you can do mesh, but I like the shortcut. So there's like a circle, shift A. So hold shift, hit A, and then your add options come up. And let's just do like a cylinder. And so there's 2 different modes. There's object mode. Well, there's a lot of modes, and edit mode. And there's this like origin point right in the middle. So it's important to know where that origin point is, because when you hit R to rotate your object, it rotates around those origin points. And you can't, when you're in object mode, and if you move your object, so I'm going to grab it with G, the origin goes with it. But if you're in edit mode and you grab it with G, the origin stays there. If I let go and go back to object mode and now rotate it, it's rotating around that origin. So I'm going to undo with Control Z, Control Z. It might be Command Z if you're on a Mac. But yeah, let's just quick do a few shortcuts. So R brings up your rotation option, and then if you want to constrain it to like the Y, hit Y. Now I'm only doing it on the Y. If I right click, it'll let go of everything. So if I accidentally get into rotation, I'm like, how do I get out? If I left click, it confirms it. So scale, you can do S, hit S, but don't hold S, just tap S, and then I'm in scale mode. I could also, you can see up here in the corner, the top left corner, you can see how much it's scaling. So I could input a number like 10. So I just scaled it by 10. I'm going to right click to let go of that. You can also, all of these commands I'm teaching, if you hit like X axis, Y, so if you hit X, it constrains it to the X. If you hit Y, to the Y, Z to the Z. If I hit Shift Z, it'll do everything except the Z, or Shift Y, everything except the Y. That can be useful if you want to like make something tall or flatten, make it more of like a plateau. So what I'm going to do, this is going to be a leg. I'm going to go into edit mode. And right now I'm in vertex select mode. So if I left click on these, I can grab those. And I'm going to grab them with just hit G once, and then you can move them. But I'm going to hit Alt, hold Alt, and click in between the vertices, and I get a, actually, go to Edge Select. So here's Vertex, Edge, Face. The middle one is Edge. I'm going to hold Alt and click. Let's just not do that now. It's might be a little too much. So I'm going to just move this. Oh, the other shortcut. So we have rotation, scale, and then grab. That's a good shortcut. So I hit G. I can then hit Y to move it on the Y, or X. But I want to keep that origin in the center because I'm going to use some modifiers in a second. So we're going to hit, the shortcut is Tab to switch between object and edit mode. So now I'm in edit mode. I can see the vertices. You can choose edges if you want to select edges. You can choose faces if you want to select faces. I'm going to hit A to select everything. Alt A deselects everything. So hit A to select everything. G to grab it. I'm going to move it on the Y. So I just moved that, the origin's there. I'm going to now scale it on everything except for the Z. So I hit S and then Shift Z, and that is going to be a leg. And then I will duplicate it, and once duplicate is Shift D, and if you don't push anything else, then you're automatically in grab mode. So I hit Shift D, and then I'm going to hit X to move it there. So there's 2 legs, right? And we didn't even have to make 2 legs, because as long as the origin is in the center, I'm going to go to this modifier tab, add modifier, and we're going to add a mirror modifier. And right now it's mirroring on the X, but let's do it on the Y axis because I want to mirror it this way. So those legs are too far apart, so I'm just going to hit A to select everything, G to grab it and move it in on the Y by hitting Y, and then it moves that mirrored image. So now my cursor is still in the center. I'm going to hit Shift A, add a sphere, scale it up, and then maybe I'll scale it on the X. So I'll hit S and then X. And then I'm kind of losing my view. So I'm going to go to top view, and by hitting 7 on the number pad key. So not on the keypad above. If you don't have a number pad key on like a laptop, you can go this view, viewpoint top, or viewpoint front. So I'm going to go to top. I also want to be in wireframe mode. So if I hit Z now in this new Blender, it brings up all my different like render settings that I can look at it in the viewport. And I'm going to go over here to wireframe and then click it. So I'm going to scale this down. I'm going to move it back on the X. I'm going to go to front view by hitting 1 on my number pad, and I'm going to move it up by hitting GZ. Okay, that's fine. Now for the head, Shift A, sphere, and I'll just place it right there. And sure, we have kind of an animal. Couple things. If you want this to be smooth shading, in this new Blender we don't have these like side toolbars, so I'm going to right click on that object, and I can see that I have this context sensitive menu, so I'm going to set shade smooth for that, right click, shade smooth. Maybe, oh, since this is all one object, right click, shade smooth. We have some weird kind of artifact because I'll get into it later, but if you want to fix that, there are some ways. One way is, well, we're not going to fix it today. So right click on this body, shade smooth. But you see they're all separate objects. So there's a couple ways to join them, and we're just going to do the most basic. Let's say we want this to be the core object. So I'm going to hit Shift, select it, hold Shift, select the head, hold Shift, select the legs. Actually, I should apply the modifier of the legs before I join it, because things will get kind of weird if it has a modifier. So click your legs, go into that little wrench on the side, apply our modifier. So now they're not mirrors anymore, they're actual objects. Hold Shift, select the head, select the body. So you want the final object, the active selection is the light orange. And I'm going to hit Control J to join them. So now it is all one object. Down here, so we can animate this now. Down here is like our little timeline. You can just left. You can go arrow forward and back. We'll figure out how to. Just click on the timer, left click and drag. Yeah, so we'll go to frame 1, and I'm going to hit I to insert keyframe on location, and then you see a little keyframe came up, and then go scroll ahead. I'm going to grab it and move it on the X, and then hit I, and I'll just do location, and there we go. We have an animated thingy. If you want to make this thingy a little cooler, let's do Shift A. Shift A, and I added a plane. I'm going to scale it up with S. I'm going to move it down on the Z axis with GZ, so it's kind of on his feet. And then let's hit Z and go into render. Now this might not work on everybody's computer. You need a computer that is like less than 5 years old. So that's not too old, but or that's not too hard, but some of us, And now this is like rendered mode, and it, by default, Blender is now rendering in this Eevee engine, which is like a real-time thing, and so that looks awesome to me. And if you want to get rid of all these grids, there's just a quick little button up here. It says hide overlays, and so now you can kind of see what it's looking like. For those of you who want to like mess with materials, turn on overlays, click your object. There's the material option down here. We can do new. By default, it does this principled shader, and we'll get into this later. Yeah, so try to play around with this. You might see some weird rendering things with this Eevee, and there are some ways to get around that. But you know, a couple things in this render option up here, it kind of looks like the back of a camera. You can do bloom, which you see it adds like a little halo, which is really cool, especially if your light is like really bright. Let's crank up the brightness of our light. Maybe I'll just say times 10. So now we have this like crazy bloom. That looks cool. There's like depth of field if your camera has that. There's motion blur for camera movement, but also this ambient occlusion I think looks good sometimes. Actually, usually, maybe not for this render. Yeah, it does look good. Just when things are near to each other, it kind of makes a fake shadow, and then you can increase the distance. So I think that adds some realism. And then let's just make him red. So I made a new material. I'm going to label it red. And let's say red. And then you can choose like how rough or shiny it is. So isn't that cool? All right, and it plays in real time. Okay, thanks guys.